My name is Tom, and I've been married to Lisa for nearly 20 years. We live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in a small, comfortable house that has been our home for most of our married life. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, where kids play on the streets until dusk, and life unfolds in predictable, serene rhythms. We have two children, Anna, 15, and Jack, 12, who are the center of our world. Life here has always seemed idyllic, a peaceful haven away from the chaos of the outside world. I work as a project manager for a construction company, a job that keeps me busy but has allowed us to live comfortably. Lisa, on the other hand, has always been the heart and soul of our family. She left her job as a nurse to focus on raising our children and managing the household. She's always been active in the community, organizing school events and charity drives, and our friends and neighbors see her as a pillar of support and kindness. For years, I believed we had a solid marriage. We shared dreams, raised our children, and navigated the ups and downs of life together. Our home was filled with laughter, love, and the kind of everyday moments that create a tapestry of shared memories. But lately, something has changed. A subtle shift that I can't quite put my finger on. It's like a shadow has crept into our lives, casting a pall over the happiness that once seemed so natural. In this small, seemingly perfect town, the seeds of doubt have begun to take root in my mind. Little did I know that the peaceful facade of our family life was about to be shattered in ways I could never have imagined. It all started innocently enough. Lisa and I were having one of our rare nights out together, a simple dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant. The kids were at a friend's house for a sleepover, giving us a much-needed break from the daily grind. The evening was pleasant, the food was excellent, and the conversation flowed easily. For a moment, it felt like old times, just the two of us, reconnecting. But then, as we were finishing our wine, Lisa said something that hit me like a punch to the gut. "Tom," she said, a playful glint in her eye, "what would you think if I told you I wanted to have sex with 3 men?" I stared at her, stunned. At first, I thought it was a joke, a poorly timed attempt at humor. But her expression was serious, a mix of curiosity and something else I couldn't quite identify. My stomach churned, and a wave of nausea swept over me. "What the hell are you talking about, Lisa?" I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. She flinched at my tone, but didn't back down. "Relax, Tom. It's just a fantasy. I thought maybe we could spice things up a bit, you know? Add some excitement to our lives." My mind was racing. This wasn't the Lisa I knew. The woman sitting across from me suggesting something so outrageous felt like a stranger. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the anger and confusion were bubbling over. "This isn't like you, Lisa. Where's this coming from?" She shrugged, looking a bit defensive. "It's just something I've been thinking about. We've been together for so long, and sometimes I wonder what it would be like to try something different. Isn't that normal?" "Normal?" I echoed, feeling a mixture of anger and hurt. "No, Lisa, it's not normal. Not for us. I can't believe you would even suggest something like this." The rest of the night was a blur. We drove home in silence, the tension between us thick and suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Her words echoed in my mind, fueling a growing suspicion that had been simmering beneath the surface for months. In the days that followed, I began to notice other things. Lisa was on her phone more often, smiling at texts she wouldn't share with me. She started dressing differently, paying more attention to her appearance even when she had no plans to go out. And there were times when she would be inexplicably absent, with vague explanations that didn't quite add up. One evening, as I was putting the kids to bed, I overheard Lisa talking on the phone in hushed tones. She ended the call abruptly when she saw me, a guilty look flashing across her face. "Who was that?" I asked casually, trying to keep the suspicion out of my voice. "Just a friend," she replied too quickly. "You don't know him." "Him." The word hung in the air, thick with implication. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of conversations, odd behaviors, and that bizarre dinner conversation. The suspicion gnawed at me, relentless and consuming. Late one night, unable to sleep, I decided to check her phone while she was in the shower. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her messages, heart pounding with every new name and thread. Most of it seemed innocent enough, but then I found a string of texts from someone named Mark. The conversations were flirtatious, intimate, far beyond the bounds of friendship. My world tilted on its axis. I felt a cold, hollow ache in my chest as I realized my worst fears might be true. Lisa was hiding something from me, something that could destroy everything we had built together. The seeds of doubt had grown into a full-blown suspicion, and there was no turning back. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The tension between Lisa and me was unbearable. Every day my suspicions grew stronger, fueled by her increasingly erratic behavior and the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. I couldn't shake the images that haunted my mind, and I knew I had to find out the truth. One evening, Lisa told me she was going to a book club meeting. It struck me as odd. She had never mentioned being part of a book club before. I tried to act normal, but the suspicion gnawed at me. After she left, I waited for a while and then decided to follow her. My heart pounded as I grabbed my keys and drove off, staying a safe distance behind her car. She drove across town to a seedy motel that I wouldn't have expected her to visit in a million years. I parked a few spots away and watched as she got out of the car, looking around nervously before disappearing into one of the rooms. My hands trembled as I got out of my car and approached the motel. I had to know what was happening behind that closed door. Every step felt like a march toward the end of the life I had known. I reached the door, my heart hammering in my chest. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door handle. But then I steeled myself and pushed it open. What I saw on the other side shattered my world. Lisa was on the bed, naked, entwined with two men. The room was filled with the sounds of their grunts and moans, a sickening symphony of betrayal. One man, who I recognized as Mark, was behind her, his hands gripping her hips, thrusting into her with a primal intensity. The other man was beneath her, his hands roaming her body as she rode him, her head thrown back in ecstasy. They didn't notice me at first, too caught up in their sordid act. I stood there, frozen, unable to comprehend the scene before me. My mind screamed at me to do something, anything, but my body was paralyzed with shock and horror. Finally, Lisa's eyes opened and met mine. For a split second, her expression was one of pure bliss, but then it twisted into a look of terror. She scrambled off the bed, grabbing for a sheet to cover herself, but it was too late. The damage was done. "Tom!" she cried, her voice a mix of panic and guilt. "This isn't what it looks like!" I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and foreign to my ears. "Isn't what it looks like? Really, Lisa? Because it looks like you're fucking two men at once in a cheap motel." Mark and the other man looked at me, their expressions ranging from confusion to fear. They hurriedly began to dress, but my focus was solely on Lisa. My anger boiled over, a volcanic eruption of rage and betrayal. "How could you do this to me? To us? To our family?" I shouted, my voice shaking with emotion. She tried to step closer, reaching out to me, but I backed away, repulsed by her touch. "Tom, please, let me explain," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Explain?" I repeated, incredulous. "There's nothing to explain, Lisa. I saw everything. I trusted you, and you betrayed me in the worst possible way." The room was thick with the stench of sweat and sex, a sickening reminder of what I had just witnessed. I couldn't stand to be there any longer. I turned and walked out, ignoring her desperate cries for me to come back. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, sorrow, and disbelief as I drove home. The image of Lisa with those men seared into my memory. When I arrived home, the house was eerily quiet. I went to our bedroom and collapsed onto the bed, staring up at the ceiling as the weight of what I had discovered pressed down on me. The woman I had loved and trusted for nearly 20 years had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of Lisa entering the house. She looked disheveled and worn, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She tried to approach me, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Don't," I said, my voice cold and hard. "I don't want to hear it. Just pack your things and go." "Tom, please," she begged, but I shook my head. "There's nothing you can say that will make this right," I replied. "I can't look at you. I can't be near you. Just go." With that, I left the room, leaving her to pack her things in silence. As I stood in the hallway, I felt a mixture of relief and profound sorrow. My life as I had known it was over, but at least now I knew the truth. The road ahead would be long and painful, but it was a path I had to take. The days that followed were a blur of pain and anger. My heart was shattered, my trust obliterated. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lisa with those men, their bodies entwined in a grotesque parody of the love we once shared. I knew I couldn't simply let her betrayal go unpunished. I needed to make her feel the same humiliation and despair she had inflicted upon me. As I sat in our empty house, a plan began to form in my mind. It was dark and twisted, born from the depths of my hurt and rage. But it seemed fitting. Lisa had destroyed our life together, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. I spent the next few days gathering all the information I needed. I went through her phone, her social media accounts, and her emails, compiling a detailed profile of her. Every intimate detail she had shared with those men, every flirtatious message, every compromising photo, they would all serve as the foundation for my revenge. Late one night, I sat at my computer and created a fake escort profile for Lisa. I used her real name, her real photos, and all the information I had gathered. I described her in explicit terms, highlighting her services and availability. I made sure the profile was as convincing as possible, leaving no doubt that she was an escort looking for clients. Once the profile was complete, I spread it across multiple escort websites and forums, ensuring it would be seen by as many people as possible. I included her phone number and email address, knowing she would be bombarded with calls and messages from men looking to hire her. The thought of her facing that kind of humiliation and intrusion brought a grim satisfaction. But I didn't stop there. I sent the profile link to her friends, her family, and our neighbors, along with a message explaining what she had done. I made sure everyone in our community knew about her betrayal, painting her as the deceitful, promiscuous woman she had become. I wanted her to feel the same isolation and shame that I'd felt since discovering her infidelity. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Lisa's phone began ringing incessantly, messages flooding in from strangers asking about her services. Her friends and family were horrified, bombarding her with questions and accusations. Our neighbors, once friendly and supportive, now looked at her with disdain and disgust. Lisa tried to deny it at first, claiming it was all a mistake, a cruel joke, but the evidence was overwhelming. The profile was too detailed, too accurate to be anything but genuine. Her reputation was in ruins, her life turned upside down. She lost her social standing, her friends, and even her job at a local charity organization. No one wanted to be associated with her anymore. I watched from a distance as her life fell apart, feeling a twisted sense of justice. She had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now she was paying the price. Every tear she shed, every look of despair on her face, brought me a measure of satisfaction. She had destroyed our life together, and now she was facing the consequences of her actions. In the quiet moments, I still felt the sting of her betrayal, the deep ache of a broken heart. But knowing that she was suffering too made it a little easier to bear. My revenge was complete, and now it was time to move forward, to rebuild my life from the wreckage she had left behind. Lisa's life continued to unravel over the next few weeks. The flood of phone calls, messages, and inquiries didn't stop. Her social circle had collapsed entirely, leaving her isolated and alone. I knew it was only a matter of time before she would try to confront me, to plead for some semblance of understanding or forgiveness. It happened one evening, just as the sun was beginning to set. I was sitting in the living room, the silence of the house a stark contrast to the chaos that had erupted in our lives. I heard a knock at the door and knew it was her. Steeling myself for what was to come, I opened the door to find Lisa standing there, looking disheveled and broken. "Tom, please," she began, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting her in without a word. She walked into the living room, glancing around as if seeing our home for the first time. She took a deep breath, then turned to face me. "I know you did this," she said, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and desperation. "You made that profile and spread those lies about me. Why, Tom? Why would you do something so cruel?" "Why?" I repeated, my voice cold and hard. "You betrayed me, Lisa. You destroyed our marriage, our family. I wanted you to feel the same pain and humiliation that you inflicted on me." Tears welled up in her eyes as she sank onto the couch. "I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. But this is destroying my life, Tom. I can't go anywhere without being harassed. I lost my job, my friends, everything. Please, you have to stop this." I stared at her, feeling a flicker of the love I once had for her, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of her betrayal. "It's too late for apologies, Lisa. You made your choices and now you're facing the consequences. She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I never meant for things to get this bad. I was lonely, Tom. You were always so busy with work and I felt like I was invisible to you. I made a terrible mistake, but I never wanted to lose everything. Her words struck a nerve, bringing back memories of the countless hours I had spent working late, trying to provide for our family. But it didn't excuse what she had done. Being lonely doesn't justify cheating, Lisa. You could have talked to me, told me how you were feeling. Instead, you chose to betray me. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. I know I was wrong. But please, Tom, I'm begging you. Take down the profile. Tell people it was a mistake. I can't live like this anymore. I sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Part of me wanted to end her suffering, to show some mercy, but another part of me was still consumed by the need for retribution. I'll think about it, I said finally. But understand this, Lisa. There's no going back to the way things were. Our marriage is over, and I'm filing for divorce. She nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I understand. Just please stop this. Let me try to rebuild what's left of my life. I watched as she stood up, her movements slow and defeated. She walked to the door, pausing to look back at me one last time. I loved you, Tom. I still do. I'm so sorry for everything. As she left, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sorrow, and a flicker of something that felt almost like pity. Lisa had made her choices, and now she was paying the price. My revenge had brought me some measure of satisfaction, but it hadn't erased the pain of her betrayal. The house felt even emptier after she was gone, the silence more oppressive than ever. I knew that moving on would be a long and difficult process, but it was the only path forward. Lisa's life was in ruins, and while I had played a part in that, I couldn't let it consume me any longer. It was time to focus on healing and rebuilding my own life, one step at a time. The day of the divorce trial arrived, casting a heavy shadow over everything. The courthouse loomed large and intimidating, its stark architecture a fitting backdrop for the disintegration of our marriage. I walked through the doors, feeling a mix of apprehension and determination. This was the final step in severing the ties that had bound us for nearly 20 years. Lisa was already there, sitting with her lawyer on one side of the courtroom. She looked tired and anxious, a far cry from the confident woman I had once known. Her eyes met mine briefly before she looked away, focusing on the papers in front of her. My lawyer, Karen, a seasoned professional with a reputation for being tough but fair, greeted me with a reassuring smile. We'll get through this, Tom, she said, handing me a stack of documents. Just follow my lead, and we'll make sure everything is handled properly. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. It was a surreal experience, listening as our lawyers laid out the details of our lives, our assets, and our failings. Karen presented the evidence of Lisa's infidelity, along with the impact it had on our family. Lisa's lawyer tried to downplay the affair, emphasizing her loneliness and my long hours at work. The judge listened patiently, his expression inscrutable. He asked us both a few questions, probing into the reasons for our divorce and the breakdown of our marriage. When it was Lisa's turn to speak, she pleaded for leniency, her voice trembling as she described the harassment and humiliation she had endured since the fake escort profile had been created. I know I made a terrible mistake, she said, tears streaming down her face, but I'm trying to rebuild my life. I just want a chance to start over, to be there for our children. I felt a pang of guilt, but I couldn't let it sway me. Lisa's actions had torn our family apart, and while I regretted the extent of my revenge, I couldn't forget the pain she had caused. When it was my turn, I spoke about the trust that had been shattered, the sense of betrayal that had haunted me since discovering her affair. I want what's best for our children, I said, my voice steady. And I believe that includes stability and a secure environment. The judge nodded, taking notes as we spoke. After what felt like an eternity, he finally delivered his verdict. The divorce was granted, and the terms were laid out clearly. Joint custody of the children, with primary residence with me. Lisa was allowed visitation rights, but the judge emphasized the importance of maintaining a stable environment for Anna and Jack. There was also a ruling on the division of assets. Our house would be sold, and the proceeds split between us. Lisa would receive alimony for a limited period, given her current lack of employment and the circumstances of our separation. As the judge concluded, I felt a strange sense of relief. The legal ties that bound us were finally severed, and while it wasn't a victory in the traditional sense, it was a step toward rebuilding my life. Lisa approached me as we were leaving the courtroom, her expression a mix of sadness and resignation. "Thank you for not making this harder than it needed to be," she said softly. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can't ever fully make up for, but I hope we can both find a way to move on." I nodded, feeling a heavy weight lift slightly from my shoulders. We need to do what's best for Anna and Jack. That's all that matters now. We parted ways outside the courthouse, each of us heading in different directions. The finality of the divorce was both a relief and a sorrow, a reminder of what we had lost and what lay ahead. The weeks that followed were filled with the practicalities of dismantling our shared life. We put the house on the market, sorted through our belongings, and made arrangements for the children. It was a painful process, but also a necessary one. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I focused on my work, threw myself into being the best father I could be, and tried to find moments of peace in the midst of the chaos. The support of friends and family was invaluable, helping me navigate the difficult path of starting over. Lisa, too, seemed to be trying to move forward. She found a new job and began to rebuild her social network, albeit slowly. Our interactions remained civil, if not friendly, driven by our shared concern for our children. In the end, the trial was just one chapter in the story of our lives, a painful but necessary step toward a new beginning. The scars of betrayal would always be there, but with time they began to fade, replaced by the hope of a better future for all of us. With the trial behind me, I focused on building a new life. The initial days were hard, filled with memories of a life that no longer existed. The empty house echoed with the absence of Lisa, and every corner held a reminder of our past. But gradually, those echoes faded, and I began to fill the silence with the sounds of a life being rebuilt. The house sold quickly, and I used my share of the proceeds to buy a smaller place, not far from our old neighborhood. It was a modest home, but it was mine, a fresh start untainted by the shadows of betrayal. Anna and Jack adjusted surprisingly well, finding comfort in the stability and routine I worked hard to provide. My relationship with the kids grew stronger as we navigated this new chapter together. I made a point to be present for them, attending school events, helping with homework, and spending quality time together. We developed new traditions, like Friday movie nights and Sunday hikes, creating memories that were entirely ours. Work became a refuge, a place where I could lose myself in the tasks at hand and escape the emotional turmoil. My colleagues, aware of what I had been through, were supportive, offering encouragement and understanding when I needed it most. I poured myself into my projects, finding satisfaction in tangible achievements and the camaraderie of my team. But it wasn't all about work and family. I knew I needed to find balance, to rediscover parts of myself that had been neglected during the turmoil of the past months. I joined a local gym, taking up boxing as a way to channel my anger and frustration into something productive. The physical exertion was cathartic, a release for the pent-up emotions that had been festering inside me. It was at the gym that I met Sarah. She was a personal trainer, a few years younger than me, with a warm smile and an infectious enthusiasm for fitness. Our initial interactions were casual, exchanging pleasantries during workouts and offering each other encouragement. But as the weeks passed, we began to talk more, sharing stories and finding common ground in our love for physical activity. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Sarah suggested we grab a coffee. We sat in a nearby cafe, talking for hours about everything from our favorite books to our childhood memories. There was a natural ease between us, a connection that felt both exciting and comforting. Our coffee dates became a regular thing, and it wasn't long before our relationship deepened. Sarah was a breath of fresh air, her positivity and zest for life a stark contrast to the darkness I had been living in. She made me laugh, encouraged me to try new things, and reminded me that there was still joy to be found in the world. Introducing Sarah to Anna and Jack was a significant step, one I approached with both excitement and trepidation. To my relief, they took to her immediately. Sarah was patient and kind, understanding the complexities of our situation and never trying to force a bond. Over time, she became a cherished part of our lives, someone we could all lean on and trust. As the months turned into a year, I found myself reflecting on the journey I had been through. The pain and betrayal that had once consumed me had been replaced by a sense of hope and renewal. I had learned to value myself, to recognize my worth, and to understand that I deserved happiness. Lisa, too, seemed to be finding her footing. Our interactions remained civil, and she respected the boundaries I had set. She focused on rebuilding her life, and while the wounds of our past would never fully heal, we found a way to coexist peacefully for the sake of our children. One evening, as Sarah, Anna, Jack, and I sat around the dinner table, laughing and sharing stories from our day, I realized how far we had come. Our little family, though not conventional, was filled with love and support. We had weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. Life was not without its challenges, but I had learned to face them with resilience and a renewed sense of purpose. The betrayal that had once seemed insurmountable was now a chapter in my past, a reminder of my strength and the capacity for growth and forgiveness. Looking back, I saw the journey for what it was, a painful but necessary path to self-discovery and healing. And as I looked forward, I saw a future filled with possibility, anchored by the love of my children and the support of the people who mattered most. In the end, the betrayal that had shattered my world had also led me to a place of new beginnings. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes, finding happiness and hope where I had once seen only despair, and for that I was grateful. I was